Today I'm going to show you Roland Cut Studio software. This is the software that we're going to use with our vinyl cutter in class to produce stickers, logos, stuff like that. So for starters, let's open up the program. I'm just going to go down to the Start menu, All Programs, and I'm going to look for something called Roland Cut Studio, and I'm going to left click on the Cut Studio application. Takes a couple of seconds to open up. This is the working environment that you see before you. If I use my scroll ball, I can scroll out and I can see the total working area of our piece of vinyl that we can set the parameters on later with. While we're looking at the environment that we're working in here, you will notice there's a little arrow in the bottom left hand corner, a red and blue arrow. That's important that it stays there. It can be moved anywhere on the screen, but it needs to be here because this is where the computer references all it's measuring from. This is called the PRZ, or the Program Reference 0, and it needs to stay there. You'll also notice up in the top left corner of your screen a little picture of a printer that has paper going through it and an A on it, and you'll also see that little arrow in the bottom left hand corner. It always needs to stay there. If it doesn't, just let your teacher know, and he will do what he needs to do to make sure it gets back to the bottom left hand corner. Okay, now that we kind of have had a basic tour of the working environment, we need to do a couple of things to set stuff up. I want to go to File, I want to go to Cutting Setup, and I want to go to Properties. And we have some things here we can manipulate. We can change from inches to metric. I'm going to work in inches. We can change the width of the vinyl, the length of the vinyl. The length isn't that critical because most of the stuff we use is from a roll, so the length really isn't that critical. I'm going to change this right now to 13. Just to show you what happens when I change the width. The two sizes of vinyl that we work with are either 13 and 22. And if I had the machine, I don't have my vinyl cutter hooked up right now, but if I did and it was turned on, I could just click this button and it would automatically tell me the width of the vinyl I have loaded in my machine and how much I have on the roll. But you don't have to have the machine turned on or hooked up, and that's why I'm doing it like this. I'm manually changing it to 13, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK again, and what you should have noticed on the screen here is it changed the width of the vinyl in the background. And if I zoom in close, you should see a grid pattern here. I'll show you how to change that. That grid pattern is like your rulers in other programs. Sometimes in drawing programs you have rulers that can be up along the top or left hand side of your page that can help you identify the size of your image. This one uses a grid pattern, and if you go up to the View menu at the top and down to the bottom of that sub-menu, you'll see something called Grid Setup, and you'll see that the Grid Setup default is 1 inch by 1 inch. You can set it to anything, whatever you feel comfortable working in. I normally leave it at 1 inch. That way, if I'm trying to make something, if I'm trying to make a piece of text 2 inches high and 4 inches long, all I have to do is count the number of squares I have here, and it's pretty easy to figure out my size information. Okay, now that we've got the cutting environment set up, there's different ways to work with information in the program. We can create text from within the program. You can see some basic tools along the side, some drawing tools, a text editor, and it works just like it would in Word. Place the cursor somewhere. I'm just going to type test. You have access under the format menu at the top here. You can change the font, you can change the style, you can pretty much do anything. If you don't like the font, you can get into any of the true type fonts you want and change it. You also can get into some character spacing, some other aspects of the fonts that some other programs don't allow you to change. If you wanted more space between these letters, you can play with that here. I'm not going to do that right now, but once it's on the page here, right, and I unselect it, you can see that I can always go back to it and change some aspect of the font if I want. If that's all I wanted though, if that's the word that I wanted to create letters for, all I'm going to do now is I'm going to click up on this pointer tool, and you'll see little handles come around it, and now if I use my shift button, I can change it to whatever size I want. Holding the shift key down while I hold one of the corner handles keeps the aspect or the size proper. If I don't do that, I can kind of distort it. and that may be the look you're going for, maybe not. If you want to keep it, you know, proper, you should use the shift key when you're trying to resize. Now, if this is all we wanted to print, we wouldn't print it way up here. If this is the bottom left corner of our vinyl, we would want to move it down so we don't waste all this vinyl up here, right? If we left this up here and told it to cut, the machine is going to know that that's the bottom left corner and move all the way up here and cut the word test, wasting all this stuff in below. So whatever you do, whenever you're creating something, you always want to work with the idea that everything should be down in this bottom left-hand corner. Just so you can see, if you wanted to duplicate it, you can't just copy paste like you can in other programs. The best way to make a duplicate copy of text in this program is to use multiple copy, and I'll just show you how that works. With your test object or your test text selected, I'm going to select multiple copy, and a window comes up, and you can choose how this works. I'm just going to go, I want to put 4 vertical versions of test above one another. You can select them individually and move them around. Right, if you didn't want them, you can delete them just by selecting them and hitting the delete key on the keyboard. Pretty simple. For text, you can do the same thing with shapes. You can draw some basic shapes here. You know, circles, ellipses. What's this one? A square, star. You can also draw, if you're comfortable using Illustrator or the pen tool, you will notice that this has some of the same features. If you wanted to edit some of these handles, you can, right? This works the exact same way in Illustrator, right? So you can make some pretty cool shapes. So that's basic what the program can do if you're working from within the program. If this is all you're going to do though, and say this was the letters you were going to do, I would encourage you to put a square or a rectangle around them. This is called a weed box, and I will explain more about what a weed box is in the next lesson. It'll really help you eliminate parts of your letter or your logo that you don't want, and it's really important that if you're cutting letters, that you put a square around them. Okay, that's one way of working with information in Cut Studio. You can also work with an image in Illustrator. So you don't have to create your image in here. You could work in Illustrator. I'm just going to pop over to Illustrator right now. I have a simple Vancouver Canucks logo. You should be able to see here that, you know, it's vectorized. I'm just clicking on the individual paths here, and we can get this right as soon as it's a vector. And I'm assuming now, if you're in an Illustrator, you understand the difference between raster and vector. Roland Cut Studio needs to work with vectors, and there's a couple of ways to do it in Illustrator. I've already covered that in other videos, so I'm not going to do that now. But if you wanted to get this image of the Vancouver Canucks logo into Roland Cut Studio to cut it out, basically all you do is you go up to the window menu in Illustrator, and you'd come down to the Cut Studio plugin, which opens up over here on the right, and you can see you can see what it's going to output to Roland. It's going to everything. It's going to output all the lines. You can just output the selected lines, right? Right now, just that outer green path is selected. So you can kind of control what you want to send to Roland Cut Studio. If you wanted to send everything, all you do now is click up on this little letter that says R, and that'll take you right into the Roland Cut Studio software, and you can see that's exactly what we have here. Now, it doesn't cut colors. You have to remember the vinyl cutter has one color loaded, and it will cut anything that's blue here. It will trace out and cut. Does that mean to say we can't do multicolor cuts? No, absolutely not. We can, but this video is basically showing you a simple way to take a vector file and create a sticker out of it, one color. I will be showing you multicolor ones in future videos. Okay. If you wanted to resize this, you can see that I can't really get any handles to show up on it. I have to do something different to it now, right? I can move it around, but I can't change the size of it right now. So if I select on Object and go to Integrate Polylines, now the handles show up on it, and if I hold my Shift button down on the keyboard, I can rescale it or resize it to whatever size I want. Counting the number of squares on the grid, I can make it, 5 by 4 or whatever it is. Okay. If you were ready to cut, you can just hit the cutting icon at the top, and it'll take it right to your cutter, and it'll start cutting. One other way I want to show you is you can import. There's an import button here, and if I click on this, it wants you to import a file. And I'm just going to open up a basic JPEG. And Roland Cut Studio has a basic raster to vector converter. I would say Illustrator's is much better. But if you weren't aware of it and wanted to try the Roland Cut Studio vector converter, you can. Basically, all you have to do, and how do I know it's not a good image or a JPEG? Well, when I zoom in on it, and I'm just using the scroll ball again, you can see that the image is very kind of grainy. You can kind of see the staircase edges around all the different colors, right? So this is a JPEG image. And let's say, for example, I wanted to make a vector sticker out of this. The best way to do this is with it selected, go to Object, Image Outline, and you'll see here an image outline window opens up and a little slider bar down here that determines how light or dark the contrast is of what it's going to vectorize. And if I just play with this, I can control the contrast and how clear the image is that's going to be vectorized. So you want it as clear as you can get, not distorting the image. I can go from completely white to completely gray, and somewhere in between is probably what I'm going to want. I'm going to leave it like that, and then I'm going to go extract contour lines. And you will notice what it did on the little image preview. You can see probably a blue outline around all the paths. If I click OK, you'll see that now in Roland Cut Studio. And if I move that out of the way, you will see it's made a rough conversion of this image to a vector. Notice the text isn't very good. You might want to write, if this was your goal, the text I would probably eliminate. The actual shape of the bear outline doesn't look that bad, but I'd probably, if I needed the KW Bruins to be in this image, I would probably create it myself with the text option here. That's about it for working with Roland Cut Studio. It's pretty easy to make multiple copies. I showed you that, right? With it selected, edit, multiple copy, and then you pick if you want them to go above or beside, keeping in mind that you only have so much space, right? In this case, we have lots of space right here. If it's 13 inches, this is a really small, right now, this is a really small vector of the KW Bruins bear, right? Right now it's about half, so that's about a 6-inch logo or 6-inch sticker. You decide how big you want it. That's it. Thanks for watching.